Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. It's Monday, August 24th, 2015, start of a brand new week, start of my birthday week. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. Do you know I have the exact same birthday as Michael Jackson? Which blows that whole astrology thing because I couldn't dance to save my life, and I'm not into little boys. But we'll be talking about that a little bit later. A lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phones when you call on in. Our third hour guest is going to be Mike Strisky of the Hydrogen House Project. They have got a whole new installation they're setting up to validate this as an energy storage technology for the future. Obviously, the big news today, stock markets starting last night, stock markets around the world crashed. Major losses everywhere. Started in Asia, spread to Europe. The Dow Industrials opened 1,000 points down. Just historic degree of loss. And then all of a sudden, magically, the Dow began to climb back up. Almost got to break even. It was within 100 points of break even. And everybody's wondering, how can that be happening just to the United States of America? And, of course, the answer is the plunge protection team has stepped in again to rig the market, crush the short sellers, and make the market look good so the government can go on saying, see, the economy's fine. Look at the stock market. And the Federal Reserve just creates all this new money out of thin air. They just type it into the computer and send it on over, pour it in all over Wall Street. Now, who pays for the price for all this new money? You do. You pay for all that newly created money through inflation. This is just another Wall Street scam to take more of your wealth for themselves without your permission and without having to actually give you anything for it. It was this kind of behavior that led Thomas Jefferson to say that banking establishments are more of a danger to the country than standing armies. Unfortunately, now we have both. So, now, adding fuel to the fire, investors are reporting problems with some of the trading systems. Ameritrade and Scottrade had technical glitches going on, huge volume, tremendous volatility. And even though the plunge protection team got the Dow almost within 100 of break even, it fell off later in the day. And what this has done, this is sending two messages to the rest of the world. First of all, that yes, the U.S. government is tinkering with the market, and they're protecting the investor class at the expense of everybody else. And two, they may not be able to pull that off because by the end of the day, the Dow was back almost 600 down. And there's a reason they can't just go on creating new money and pouring it all over Wall Street, because every time they add more instantly created money to the total volume of dollars in circulation, the dollar is seen as less and less reliable and trustworthy to the rest of the world at a time when the U.S. government is still trying to have the dollar hold its position as the global trade and banking currency. So they're in a bit of a corner. Story over an Investment Watch blog. Apparently there were some margin calls today, which is going to cause a lot of upset for people. Apparently CNBC is already saying there needs to be another government bailout for Wall Street. Every time Wall Street scams itself into a mess, they're going to make the taxpayer pay for it. That's their solution to all the problems. We'll just take another $1 trillion from the American people and give it to the banks so the banks can loan it back to the American people at interest. Isn't that a wonderful solution? Well, if you're a banker, yeah. It's great. Not so good for you, the American people, who are drowning in all this debt, which rightfully should not exist in the first place. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog again, the derivatives market is beginning to crack because even though that 1,000-point drop was reduced to only 600 down, we're starting to see enough businesses default on their loans where the derivatives are starting to activate. They can't just ignore all of them, and so that's getting into trouble. One thing that is very obvious to everybody at this point, this idea that we're in an economic recovery is now gone. We all know it is a lie and a fraud, because private central banking is inherently unstable. It's always going to create more debt than money with which to pay the debt, and the debt will grow and grow and grow faster than the available money supply until servicing that debt costs so much it locks up the entire system. Look at what's going on with Greece. They finally got a bailout. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. What happened to the bailout money? Goes into Greece, turns right around, and goes right back out to the people that Greece owes money to. None of it stays in Greece to help the people, who are now saddled with even more debt because of the new bailout, plus austerity and privatization. The property of the people of Greece is being sold off by their government to private interests under this illusion of debt. And that is the grand scam behind all of it, to get the world to use these debt-based currencies and then let the debt build up to the point where the bankers can come on in and say, well, you can't pay the debt. We now own your country, your city, your buildings, your factories, your national parks. We own all the land. We own it all. It is our property, and you are now tenants. You are serfs who are allowed to live by our leave. It's a gigantic scam, and the end result is a return to feudal society of a few lords and ladies owning everything, and the rest of us perpetual servants and slaves. That's what they want to do. That's what they're trying to do, and they're awfully, awfully close. Apparently in Australia, $57 billion wiped out in minutes as their stock market took a plunge. China injected $100 billion into their stock market, trying to kick that off. Apparently, they went to the extent of looting some of their public pension funds. And that's a path you don't want to go on down. We've already done it here in the U.S., starting with the Clinton administration, looting the Social Security cash surplus for the baby boomer retirements, spending it as general revenues, and now they can't put it back. Over in Britain, they have issued a warning to the public to be prepared for a possible 1-month shutdown of the banks. In other words, get food, water, canned goods, and cash, which is good advice for everybody at this point, because this fantastically complex economic enslavement system is going to lock up. And when it does, none of these institutions you have been forced to be dependent on are going to be dependable. They're just not going to be there. Now, apparently, according to a story over at governmentslaves.info, pension funds are starting to sue the big banks over the manipulation of the $12.7 trillion treasuries market. They're all engaged in rigging and manipulation and fraud. It's the only way they can keep the economy looking like it's successful around Wall Street. It's one giant criminal enterprise to impoverish and enslave ordinary people with the eager cooperation of the federal government, who are just already lining up for those generous campaign fundraising checks for going into next year. It's a completely corrupted system. And what is the net result? Right now in the United States of America, supposedly the greatest nation on earth, more than 40% of American children are living in poverty. That is shameful. We cannot call ourselves a wealthy nation when 40% of the children are living in poverty. The illusion of wealth of the American nation is we have a bunch of billionaires, individuals who are very, very rich in a sea of poverty, hunger, homelessness. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Fox News is still going on about the wild ride on the Dow today, and it certainly was. Set historic records for volatility, single-day plunge, scale of the almost not quite recovery, and then the subsequent drop. So everybody who bought into the plunge protection team's illusion that the market was rebounding and bought in near that minus 100 level got clobbered because it closed 600 down. And see, that's something you need to understand about the plunge protection team. They don't care about the little investors they never have. Every time they halt a market correction, it's destroying all the short sellers who are in there playing by the rules and short selling in expectation of a market going down, and then the government goes in and props it right back up again and wipes these people out. But hey, who cares about them, right? We just need to have a soaring Dow to reassure the world that America's economy is still the greatest on earth. I don't think anybody's believing it anymore, because in the long run, all the instantly created money in the world cannot reverse the laws of supply and demand. It's really what it comes down to. All right, we're going to start taking some phone calls here. Steve in Massachusetts, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I finally convinced my wife about the stock market and how it's going to crash. But I got a question about the pension.
Yes.
We both, my wife and I, work for the government, and we have something called a TSP.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't withdraw you can't take out your money. You can take out a little, but you have to repay it. But you can't take it all out unless you retire or you quit your job.
Mm-hmm.
So we're pretty much stuck with what we have in our TSP. And there's an option where you can go a high risk stocks and pretty much what's in the stock market, or you can go to low risk, which is the bonds. And if you go into bonds, I told my wife, just go into bonds right now. You won't lose anything in the stock market. But I know that the bonds are in a big bubble too. So
that's right. The bonds are starting to default. Detroit put out bonds and all these other. Yeah, there is a bond bubble. There are no more safe investments outside of silver and gold, and that's why they're trying to keep those prices manipulated down. Because if they didn't, and gold and silver were trading at their real worth, their real value, their real prices right now, everybody'd be dumping their stock portfolios, closing their savings accounts, selling their bonds, and going into physical metals. And at some point down the road, we know the U.S. government's going to have to try and figure out a way to take away all the physical silver and gold from the American people to give to those banks who played fast and loose with other people's gold that had been placed in their vaults for safekeeping. And again, it's not without precedent. Back in 1933, Roosevelt outlawed private ownership of gold coins and gold bars, ordered everybody to turn them in. They got a nice little stack of ink and paper in exchange for it. Something like $20 an ounce, I think it was. And gave all the gold to the banks to get them out of the mess they were in, because these private central banks are inherently unstable. They cannot be made to work over long periods of time without serious problems repeating over and over and over again. And every time it gets into problems again, they just work out some other way to loot the people to keep their little Ponzi scheme going a bit longer.
Yeah, I told my wife, you can lose your money now or you could lose it later in bonds, but unfortunately, it looks like we're going to lose it all.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, and I know there's a lot of people out there cheering the 1,000-point Dow drop because we're hoping to see the spectacle of stockbrokers flying out of those windows on Wall Street and splattering on the pavement below. It's not going to happen. Those buildings are all air-conditioned now. You cannot open those windows. Probably a lot of brokers owe their lives to that fact right now. But the reality is that when all of these companies get hammered on their stock prices, they're going to turn around and figure out some way to just get the money from the people. In the end, ordinary Americans are forced to pay for all of it. Higher prices, shorter supplies, higher interest rates, more fees, tariffs, and whatever. In a fascist economic state, the people are made to pay for all the losses. That's what fascism is. If you're rich, you get to keep it. If you lose money, we'll make the people cover it. That's fascism in a nutshell.
Yeah, and as I tell my wife, we don't know what stocks for our retirement. We don't know which stocks. We don't know the company. We don't know the money manager. We don't know anything about it. Yeah, it's ours, but we can't withdraw it. And it's a silly system they have.
It really is.
Really our money.
And again,
be able to take it.
Look at how that Hillary's cattle futures trades work, where all the money was in a pool, as it were, and they bought and sold all these commodity options, and the broker simply put the winning ones in Hillary's account and shared the losing ones to the less politically favorable. I mean, the system is just wide open for fraud, and we know the Securities Exchange Commission is not doing their job of keeping an eye on things, both because of how many of these banks and institutions have been sued for fraud, and because the SEC sat on their butt for 12 whole years while Bernie Madoff with the loot ran his little Ponzi scheme, cost the American taxpayer $69 billion.
No, trust me, if it was up to me, I'd take all that money, withdraw, and put it in the gold and silver.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the only real money, and it's been proven over time.
Well, gold, silver, any kind of a commodity with recognized global value. I mean, a lot of people are collecting platinum coins. Tantalum has strategic value. There was an aborted effort to make copper an investment metal, but you have to have so much of it, and it's a storage problem before you're talking significant money. But, you know, any fixed commodity is going to work. I mean, tritium, you could basically put your money into tritium. Of course, that's only got a 12-year half-life. Anyway, listen, Steve, going to let you go. We've got another caller here on the line I'm going to switch to, and I don't know your name and where you're calling from, but what's on your mind? Is there anybody on this telephone line? Apparently not, and we're going to let you go. Now, getting off of the economy and into the war zones, emphasis on the plural, story coming out of Russia Insider, pointing a finger at the deadly cheering for war in Ukraine by all the Western press. Washington Post is an opponent of the Minsk II peace agreements. The editors are out there basically screaming that we've got to support the junta in Kiev, that we're not supporting them enough, we're not giving them enough weapons, we're not giving them enough money. They're out there arguing for war because the United States government has a long history. Every time they get into a hideous fiscal mess, they get out of it by getting into a world war. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, and here we are. And this time it's going to go nuclear, almost from the start, because the U.S. cannot win a conventional war against Russia and China. And speaking of nukes, the U.S. has announced they're going to deploy nuclear-capable B-52s and submarines near South Korea. So they're trying to stir up more trouble over there. Give us a war. I don't care with who. We just need a war to save the banks. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Ron in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Big fan of yours for years, man.
Thank you.
What I'm worried about here is, I work 3 jobs, man. I'm here in New York City. My wife works. We make over $130,000 a year, yet we still live to check to check. I literally have $60 in my bank right now. What happens if the market crashes to people like us? I mean, we rent, we don't own. I mean, it's just terrible here in New York City, And the worst part about it is one of my jobs that I do, I drive a Rolls Royce around for somebody that's a part of the 1%, and I just listen to him, talk, and sometimes he complains about making only $2 million a month on some company he just bought. Also, I need a soundtrack for all the music you play, when you come back from your commercial breaks. I really enjoy it.
Well, thank you. We have a website for my radio show. It's WRHradio.com, and about halfway down the page, there's a link to the music of the show, and that has a little player that plays the full-length versions of all the music. My lovely wife, Claire, wrote a great deal of it. The others are tracks from artists who have graciously given us permission to use the music. In a couple of cases, these were songs written specifically for and about WhatReallyHappened.com. Now, as far as what's going to happen, again, while we would all like to cheer the fact that the 1%ers lost $180 billion over this last few days, the reality is the repercussions of it are going to be felt throughout our entire economy, and it's going to hit ordinary people very, very hard. You're going to start seeing companies lay people off. You're going to see companies that are trying to recover from the drop in stock value raising their prices. In the end, the way the system is set up, there is no isolation between the high-risk, high-loss activities of the 1% and the rest of the population. There should be barriers so that these people who want to go on out and play on this giant open-air casino called Wall Street will play the game and take their winnings or eat their losses and leave the rest of us alone. But the way our economy is set up right now, it is very much like a casino, but with a slight change of the rules. The people who come into the casino and play, if they win, they get to take all their money home. If somebody comes into that casino and they lose, the manager of the casino goes around to all the employees, to the bellhops and the room maids and the front desk clerks and the cooks, and says, here, you got to give me some money. I got to give to this guy so they can go back to the big wheel. And obviously, for the customers, that's a sweet deal. It's all upside. But for everybody working in that casino, it gets very, very tiring that no matter how hard they work, they're taking home less and less because they're having to cover the losses of the bad players at the casino. And yet that is exactly how our current financial system is set up. And that is economic fascism. The winners get to keep their money. Those who lose money, the government forces the American people to pay. And but through that's how it works. And when the stock market crashes, you're going to see a lot of businesses go out of business. They're going to have to let their employees go. The government's not going to have the money to take care of people. The 1%ers are going to be spiriting their money out of the country to someplace safe and sit there and laugh at how silly we all were to fall for their little private central banking scam.
Can I tell you one last thing? I've been watching CNBC all day, and it seems that the trend here is blame China, blame China, blame China.
Yes. We saw that last week. Oh, it's all China's fault. And again, these scammers on Wall Street, just like the politicians in Washington, D.C., these are not people who can accept responsibility for their wrong actions or mistakes. They're always going to try and find a scapegoat. And we've been hearing this, let's blame China for it all, starting last week. And I'll give you a good example of how the money junkies, being sociopaths in their own right, don't want to own up to the fact that they've caused this mess. A few years back, there was a wonderful documentary made about the meltdown of 2008. It was called Inside Job, and it won the Academy Award for Best Documentary for that year and then promptly disappeared from the American media. And in its place was this rather hastily put together movie by HBO, Too Big to Fail, that retold the story of 2008 to make it look like all the big Wall Street people were heroes and struggling with forces beyond their control, and were willing to sacrifice health and whatever, and they weren't the bad guys, they were victims like everybody else. And it was just a blatant piece of bought and paid for propaganda. Whatever HBO's price was for selling out, the money junkies made it. But that's it. They spend a huge amount of money to convince you that they're honorable people, that they're trustworthy people, that you can trust them with your money. And yet look at all these cases of rigging and fraud, LIBOR, gold, silver prices, treasury bonds we were talking about earlier in the show. And I'll give you a story here that really, for me, showed me what banks and bankers really are. Some years ago, when I was working as a visual effects supervisor on the TV series Lost, we did a location at one of the biggest, nicest banks in downtown Honolulu. I'm not going to name names. And when you are standing where the customers stand, it is beautiful. And it just exudes strength and confidence and trust. Because of the requirements of the production, we're back around where the tellers and the executives sit, and from that point of view, it was all rotting wood and duct tape, and it looked like a cheap TV set, cheaper than our own. And that's what it is. When you're in a bank lobby, it's a facade. It's part of the illusion that you can leave your money there. Have you ever noticed how much banks and churches look alike in terms of the architectural motifs? Because it's all based on faith. You can believe we will take care of your money. And no, they're taking care of themselves. Remember, these private central banks do not exist to serve the nation. They do not exist to serve the people. They exist to serve themselves first, foremost, and last.
Great, Mike. Thanks. And Mike, man, you look a little big on the screen there, man. Please take care of yourself. We need you, man. We love you, and we had a rough night last night, with between thunderstorms and all the other stuff, and I didn't get anywhere near enough sleep, and I'm going to take a nap as soon as the show is over. But thank you for your concern.
end of this week, I'm going to be years old, and, I'm a high-mileage human at this point. The only good thing is nobody's ever going to be able to say he tragically died young.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Chad in Canada. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. I'm just calling in regards to we're going to be having our election here in October, and just kind of wanted to know what you thought about that, or you've been following our candidates much?
Not very close. I get a lot of information and insight from Jim Goddard up in Vancouver. I do know I would like to see Stephen Harper voted out, but other than that, I don't have any opinions.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. I enjoy listening to your show, and look forward to talking to you again, Michael.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the kind words. We're going to let you go, and we're coming up here on a commercial break. When we come on back, we'll be talking about what's going on over in Korea and a bunch of other stuff as well. So we're going to take a break for commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And, oh, by golly, we got lots and lots of calls waiting on the line, so I'm going to go ahead and start taking them. Steve in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm always confused when I see them, when the market takes a huge dump like it did today, and especially over the last couple of days last week, and then to see them ringing the bell and jubilant and smiles. Have you ever thought about what they're smiling about? I mean, I know somebody's losing, like at the casino, and somebody is gaining. I guess maybe that's what they're smiling about. I mean, somebody lost their shirt.
No. What's going on is the stock market itself is not buying and selling the stocks for themselves. They're just getting the sales commissions. Whether the clients make money or lose money, the actual stock market is getting the commissions. They're kind of like bookies is what it is. And so, of course, they're happy. Any day when there's a lot of volume, they make more money.
Right. Well, I just saw a little bit ago the Shanghai Composite is down 8.5% right now. So there you go.
Yeah, and the Baltic Dry Index is starting to plunge as well. So the indicators are there. Like I said last week, I have a feeling that what we're seeing right now is a repeat of August 1929, where there was a dip, everybody got rattled, then it improved, and everybody breathed a sigh of relief, and were caught completely by surprise when October came.
You know what? I emailed you that. I think that the Baltic Dry Index has been manipulated. It was because there's no way it doesn't fit the big picture, and somebody's been tweaking that because they've been looking at it now, and people are catching on that. This is a future economic indicator of how industry is really doing, manufacturers doing. And they must have been playing with that number, too, because we are actually much higher than we should be at this time right now.
Well, here's a challenge. I dare you to find any financial government indicator that isn't being rigged and manipulated for propaganda purposes.
I'm right there with you.
That's where we are right now. It's all one gigantic lie.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks. We're going to switch over to Cameron in the United Kingdom. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, good afternoon, Michael. Michael, just a quick question. Is there any reason that it might not be a manufactured one? You mentioned 29. In 29, I presume, from what I know, they've done that, and they've bought banks for penny in the pound. They've bought businesses for penny in the pound, or penny in a dollar, if you like. I understand about the globalism. I understand that, one falls, the rest follow. But then again, they're all in it. The head of the beast is the same person, same group of people, I might say. So, is there any way that it might sort of just be another sort of maneuver to tidy up the market a little bit, buy the ones that they want for as cheap as they want, at the same time push people into more misery, basically?
You cannot rule it out, but I think the fallacy is thinking that there's some sort of a grand unified plan going on rather than an epiphenomenon of lots of little individual scammers pursuing their own particular goals, and where the scams overlap is where the damage is greatest.
Excellent. Thanks ever so much, Michael. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And we're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, I was watching CNBC today, and you can see Jim Cramer. We can hear it in his voice, but he's still trying to sell Apple. It was hilarious to see, you know, and they asked him, should you buy Apple? And he's like, you can hear in his voice today, he's basically probably saying no to himself, but he's telling everybody else yes, you know.
Well, that's his job. That's why he makes all the money that he makes. He goes on out, you know, and he tells you, you know, the stocks that he's being told to promote. And, you know, he has a tremendous amount of influence. I mean, anybody who knew ahead of time what Jim Cramer was going to say on his show is going to be able to make a killing on the stock market simply by, you know, buying into the stocks Jim is going to recommend or short selling the stocks that Jim is going to bash on. I mean, that's a heck of a lot of power to having just one guy.
That's why he's worth over $100 million if people don't know that.
Yeah. Well, you know, the liars make big bucks in the United States of America.
And also, they also were pushing, there's no more, they don't say crash anymore. It's entering correction territory.
Yeah. I love
every channel.
Yes.
You can see a correction. It's in the correction.
Well,
they're all on the same page, you know.
A crash is defined as a 5% drop within a single day, which did happen in Asia last night. Yeah, they want to come up with new euphemisms so that you're not feeling the negative connotation of the previous words. Nobody uses the word depression anymore. It's recession. And they're trying to put, you know, a kinder, gentler, more positive thing where you're saying, oh, okay, that's the word. It's light and fluffy, and therefore I don't have to feel upset about it.
And to Cameron in Great Britain, I think, and to some of your listeners that don't think, I think this is a legitimate stock market because there's too much debt in the world.
Yes.
And people don't realize that it's just unsustainable debt. That's what's causing all this. The stock market is overvalued. It's not worth 80% of what it's worth.
I would agree with you. I think this is unavoidable, but on the other hand, there are certain operators on the inside who are trying to shape the nature of the decline in a way that they can benefit from. For example, you know, anybody who knew that the plunge protection team stick wasn't going to last through the end of the day could have made a lot of money short selling within that small period of time. Everybody in there is looking for an angle or a scam, and that is really what's wrong with the financial system and why it's become completely disconnected from the lives of ordinary, honest, law-abiding Americans.
And to you and your listeners, just be prepared. You know, have some canned goods, water if you don't have a well, and some other things.
Absolutely. We pulled all of our money out of the stock market, and we're investing in canned foods and shotguns.
That's it. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Fred in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, Mike. Thank you so much for taking my call. Back when you were talking about the Roosevelt administration and the way they outlawed gold and silver, the lawful money. Well, this is one of the points I'd like to bring up, Mike, is when Roosevelt recalled all the gold and silver coins.
Just gold. Gold. Roosevelt did not.
Gold. I'm sorry, gold.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Roosevelt
gold.
did not
right.
ban silver, but they may this time.
Right. I hope not. But when Roosevelt got done collecting all the gold coins, he issued $20 bills. But remember, he revalued gold at $35 an ounce, losing 75% of the buying power of the people's true value of money. That's what extended the Depression so far out, is because when Roosevelt took all the gold in, then he revalued it at $35 an ounce. Now, isn't that wonderful when working people lost 75% of their true value worth and got paper money in exchange for the lawful money of gold?
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
And even that was not enough to keep the private central bankers and the money junkies happy, because then they turned around and tried to plan a coup against Roosevelt to establish a real fascist economic dictatorship in this country. And by the way, to me it looks like they finally succeeded. It took them a little longer than they were expecting, but anybody who understands economics and history understands we're not a capitalist nation anymore. We're not a socialist nation, despite all the complaining and whining you hear on the media. We have descended into outright economic fascism. And the irony here is that Vladimir Lenin predicted that when Western capitalism failed, it would inevitably transition to fascism to prolong and preserve the wealth and power of the elites.
Excellent points, Mike. Keep up the good work, and we learn a lot from your radio program. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to grab Jeff in Minnesota real quick. We're almost at the top of the hour. What's on your mind?
Well, we're having crime problems here in Minneapolis. They spent $250 million building a new stadium. It's not quite done yet. We're just overrun with riffraff, but we had some sort of a conference about some supernatural show, some guy named Misha Collins. I don't really know the Hollywood actors, but he got assaulted downtown somewhere by the convention center and the hotels, and they didn't talk about it until after the conference was over. And apparently, you're really not safe in downtown Minneapolis anymore because the police are kind of ordered to look the other way.
Well, we know the police don't enforce drug laws against the rich. The police department in Detroit is now telling people, arm yourselves. We can no longer protect you. That's how out of control it is. Jeff, keep your head down, keep your body armor on and your helmet on. It's a rough world out there. We got to take a break for our top of the hour news, and we'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Stephen in Ireland, thank you so much for waiting all this time. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. How are you? I just want to say quickly, I'm a big fan of the show. 2 things I just want to ask you about, and then I'm going to hang up. You might just address them. One is kind of, I reckon, is involved in this stock market crash. First one is Soros, and the second one is Kissinger. So you might just give you a few words on those, and I will listen in. Thanks, Mila.
Well, thank you very much for the phone call. I mean, obviously, George Soros, a large part of his business is buying and selling stocks, and I'm sure he was very heavily impacted or impacting events here. Now, we know that when China's stock market first took a major dump a couple of weeks ago, the Chinese government came out and said it was a deliberate attack on their stock market, and they specifically named George Soros as involved with that. Because remember, from the U.S. point of view, they need to destroy global trust in the yuan and the ruble in order to keep the world coming to the U.S. dollar as the global trade and banking currency. And so the U.S. government's in a real awkward situation. Every time they type more numbers into a computer or turn on that printing press to paper over the deficiencies in our economy, the less and less reliable and trustworthy the rest of the world sees the U.S. dollar. They see it heading the same way as the Zimbabwe dollar. And so it's a classic rock and a hard place kind of a situation. Now, as far as Kissinger is concerned, he is less involved in economic warfare than he is on the real kind, especially the covert clandestine types, such as what he did in Chile. And, of course, Kissinger is infamous for his National Security Study 200, which said that America's economic interests were best served by thinning out the population in the third world who were living over resources that U.S. corporations needed and had the effrontery to actually use those resources themselves. How could they even do that? Don't they know that's our oil and gold and whatever that they're living over, and they're not supposed to touch it? That was apparently his attitude. So basically, Soros is coming in from the financial end. Kissinger is a geopolitical expert analyst. And both of them, though, dream of respective empires where all the world is subservient to the United States, whether it's the U.S. government or the U.S. banking establishment. And I imagine both of them are feeling a little bit frustrated about that today. Now, things seem to be calming down over in the Koreas. They've had a meeting to sort of tone down the rhetoric. South Korea is saying they will stop the loudspeaker propaganda broadcast if the North apologizes for planting a mine that injured 2 South Korean soldiers. That apparently is the initiating event that started all of this. So that looks to be kind of calming down. Now, from the U.S. point of view, they're not happy about that. That's why they're sending over the B-52s and the nuclear bombers and everything, because the U.S. government is desperate for a real bloody war against a military peer. And at this point, they're so desperate they don't care who it is. And getting the Koreas back into conflict might be seen as opening up a back door to declaring war on China. The problem there being that China is not going to back North Korea. In fact, I'm beginning to suspect that China may have given Kim Jong-un's leash a really good yank and said, heel boy, back off on all this nonsense. Now, we have been talking about this next story for quite a long time, and we're starting to get more and more confirmation. The ex-head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Michael Flynn, is out there confirming the White House intentionally planned and carried out a program to fund and train Syrian ISIS fighters. And that's a huge scandal because we are all being told that ISIS is evil. They beat up on puppy dogs. They steal socks from your dryers. They pass wind in the elevators. And we're supposed to surrender our taxes and the lives of our children in this war on terror against ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And then we find out the president has been actually spending more of our tax money to give ISIS weapons to use against Bashar al-Assad. It's getting hard to tell the good guys from the bad guys without a scorecard here. Now, the Iran deal is still moving forward, and the indications are that despite a massive push by Netanyahu, by Israel, and by AIPAC, that they're not going to get a veto-proof majority with which to pass this bill to pull the United States out of the P5+1 agreement. And even though it's moving forward, you still have all of these U.S. officials who are all wonderful friends of Israel saying, we've got to attack Iran, we've got to go, we've got to do this. Okay, here's your rifle, here's your parachute, watch your head climbing into that transport plane, and we'll call Tehran and tell them you are on your way to kick their butts all by yourself. But we know this is another made-up out-of-thin-air war on a nation that hasn't actually done anything to us, and we're going to sit this next one out. Thank you very much. Now, the latest head count in terms of this bill to kill the U.S. participation in the P5+1, it's every Republican in the U.S. Senate, plus these Democrats that are going to try and kill this Iran deal. Menendez out of New Jersey, Schumer, New York, Wyden, Oregon, Bennett, Colorado, Booker, New Jersey, Cantwell, Washington State, Cardin, Maryland, Casey, Pennsylvania, Coons, Delaware, Heitkamp, North Dakota, Mikulski, Maryland, Murray, Washington State, Peters, Michigan. Michigan. Peters in Michigan, Stabenow in Michigan, and Warner in Vermont. And again, let's take all these people, give them a rifle, a parachute, and just drop them over Tehran. And note, I did not say give them bullets for those rifles. Just it's a decoration. What can I tell you? And even if Congress passes a bill to end the Iran deal, and Obama vetoes it, and Congress overrides the veto, thereby proving to the entire American people that they actually work for the government of Israel, and not us, all they can do is keep the U.S. out of the peace deal. All the other member nations of the P5+1, this is a done deal. They're already in there making contracts, opening up markets, selling products. Great Britain just reopened their embassy. They're all moving forward. And American businesses that might actually be able to make some money doing business with Iran are having to sit on their hands while Israel's whores in the U.S. Congress, figure out what they're going to do. Now, Ehud Barak has come out saying that Netanyahu has had plans to attack Iran 3 times in 2010, 2011, and 2012. And the Israeli military stood up and said, this is not a good idea. We're not sure we can carry it off. This isn't some little country like Syria or Lebanon or even Iraq where we just know we can walk on in and walk back out. Iran actually has weapons. They'll shoot back. They probably thought the same thing about Syria until Syria shot down one of their fighter planes. And apparently in 2012, Netanyahu was getting ready to attack Iran, but was talked out of it during a visit of the American Secretary of Defense during this joint American-Israeli military exercise. But we're all supposed to think that Iran is the threat to peace in the Middle East. Israel wants to attack. Israel wants to attack. Israel wants to attack. Iran is the threat to peace. This is coming from Ehud Barak within the Israeli government establishment itself. Yeah, they're trying to start a war. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, over in Ukraine, something very odd has just happened. According to Financial Times, the international creditors of Ukraine, the money junkies, the IMF, the ECB, the World Bank, the Fed, they've all just agreed to cancel 20% of Ukraine's debt. It doesn't exist. It's gone away. Huzzah, huzzah. And, of course, this means Ukraine is no longer hovering at the edge of default and is now able to borrow even more money with which to buy weapons to fling at eastern Ukraine. Rather an odd contrast to these same creditors' treatment of Greece, where the attitude is, give us everything. We own it all now. I want the Parthenon for my front lawn. Now, apparently, Ukraine itself is not happy with that and is demanding the cancellation of 40% of their debt. I think they might actually get it because Poroshenko's job is to get that war with Russia going, although in the German media, they're starting to say, Poroshenko's running out of time. The people of Ukraine have been saying they want the war to end. He's not doing that. The people Poroshenko really works for are saying, get the war going. He hasn't been able to do that yet. But he did get the debt reduction, something that Greece, who is not making war on anybody, was unable to get. And that tells you a lot about the attitudes of these bankers. They love wars. War is the richest harvest for bankers. They don't even care which side wins or loses because they make money off of both. That's it. Bank business down, start a war. Now, here in American politics, the polls continue to show Trump way out in the lead. Both Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton's numbers are continuing to decline as Americans finally realize that the Oval Office is not an hereditary prize to be passed back and forth among two ruling dynastic families. Now, Business Insider is over there talking about one of Hillary's latest arguments, trying to deflect the email scandal, that the email wasn't classified when she got it, because as it turns out, much of the documents sent to the Secretary of State are classified on creation. There was never a time where they were not classified. Now, Hillary's private email server does not have the added software to detect and interpret the added tags on the email that say this is classified. Special compartmentalized intelligence, no foreign, tag keyhole, whatever. So Hillary is kind of sort of weasel wording when she says, I never received any email that was marked as classified because her system couldn't interpret and display the marks. That's basically it. But with that revelation that these documents, some of the documents already found in her emails, were created classified, destroys her argument that, hey, they weren't classified when I got them. Now, the Clinton campaign is in full panic mode. They're scrambling, trying to contain the damage. And they're just coming out with these bogus arguments. Hillary was out there saying, well, you know, every different government department has its own rules for classification, and they don't agree, and so it may have been classified here, but not over here. Well, the way classification works, it doesn't matter what department classifies it under what rule. If it's classified, it's classified. And they're out there saying, well, the document shouldn't have been classified. I don't agree with the classification. It's all the fault of the silly classification rules. Now her campaign is backing up and realizing that they have made several strategic mistakes in the way they've handled this so far. For one thing, seriously underestimating the intelligence and analytical ability of the American people in seeing through all this bovine excrement. And, of course, one step back, the biggest strategic mistake they made was choosing Hillary as a candidate for 2016 in the first place, knowing she's carrying more baggage than Kim Kardashian on a photo shoot. Now, even the Washington Post is finally admitting that this email scandal has the potential to do real damage to Hillary Clinton. And CBS has started interviewing some of Clinton's top donors who have come out and said if Biden steps into the race, they will switch their support. No more checks for Hillary because of the email scandal. Going to throw their support to Biden. In other words, the buzzards are circling over Hillary Clinton, just waiting for her to flop over so they can drop on down and have their fill of political carrion. Now, Hillary's latest defense is they're calling attention to the fact that when Bush left the White House, they deleted hundreds of thousands of emails. And yes, they did, but there's a key difference. The Bush White House had their official U.S. government email accounts, which were saved and archived. The emails that were deleted were from separate, isolated, not used for government business, personal accounts. But Hillary's trying to say, see, it's the same thing. If you didn't go after Bush, you shouldn't go after me. All right, we're going to grab a phone call before the commercial break. Mo in Florida, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Thank you for taking my call. I know this is your show is what really happened, so I've been just dying to get your opinion on this thing in Tianjin, that the largest commercial or man-made port there in China, and if they, right after they devalue their currency, they have this explosion, and I guess there was two explosions, and
there was the pipeline in Moscow, and now a steel mill in Tokyo has gone up. All of a sudden, there seems to be a lot of industrial facilities blowing up, and it does seem like there's too many of them going on for this to just be an unconnected series of stupid accidents.
Well, you know, I know you're alert to this this poisoning the well situation, and you educated me on that, which I really appreciate. But do you think this kinetic bomb, where they have this 18-foot titanium type of bomb that is just it's kinetic explosion fired from space, do you think the United States did that to that port? Do you think that's what that was?
No, because the part about the rod of God, that's the poison the well. That's nonsense. First of all, when you deorbit something, it has to be guided to hit its target. You can't just drop a single heavy object from orbit and know where it's going to hit. The winds, high altitude winds, changing density of the atmosphere cannot be done. Has to be guided. In any event, it's nonsense. Anything coming down from space is going to light up all the Chinese air defense radars. Got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, and we'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And there's an interesting article over in Op-Ed News, how Obama should charge Hillary Clinton with espionage. And the reason for that is very simple. The original Espionage Act was written in 1917 to combat German saboteurs during World War I. And the Espionage Act is actually very simple, considering it's a law written in Washington, D.C. It says that a person is guilty of espionage if he or she provides national defense information to any person not entitled to receive it. As Secretary of State, it is unavoidable that national defense information was being sent to Hillary Rodham Clinton and was exposed on her server to people not entitled to receive it. Now, over the weekend, I wrote an article, and it's very lengthy. A lot of people having trouble getting through it. And it's titled, The Hillary Email Scandal, The Scandals Behind the Scandal. And it starts off reminding everybody that there's a term in propaganda called a limited hangout. And this refers to admitting to a small scandal, survivable scandal, as a distraction from greater scandals that have to remain hidden because they could result in prison or even the collapse of the government itself. And one of the examples I cited was how the Whitewater investigation, which was tied in with the savings and loan meltdown, corruption, coerced loans, all kinds of financial skullduggery, including links from the Clintons to the Iran-Contra gun and drug-running scandals. And all of that was a big scandal that threatened the legitimacy of the entire government. And so when Kenneth Starr took over from Robert Fisk as the special prosecutor, he immediately reframed the Whitewater scandal as, oh, the president got oral sex from Monica Lewinsky in the Oval Office, there's a stained blue dress. Oh, and they made a big deal about it, and Clinton lied under oath, and, you know, he got impeached but not removed from office, and then, oh, it was all over, and most Americans fell for it. Under constant media bombardment about Monica Lewinsky and the blue dress, most Americans came to believe that Whitewater was just about Bill Clinton catching a little extra on public property, the White House. But it never was. Because the real scandal that was being hidden was about government-sanctioned drug running, gun running, violations of the Boland Act. And that's what's meant by a limited hangout. I'll admit to a small crime if it allows me to duck exposure of the big crime. So forth and so on. So we go on down through all of this, and we talk about Iran-Contra, and then we start looking at Hillary's email scandal. And so far, it's being presented to you as, was she inappropriate in using a private email server? Which actually, that's already settled. It was a violation of government policy. But we need to start asking ourselves, what's going on behind the email server itself we're not supposed to pay attention to? Now, part of it was alluded to in that story from the ex-head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, who is confirming once again that the U.S. trained and supplied ISIS, a declared enemy in time of war. The government admits Libyan weapons were flowing through Benghazi to Syria, and the consulate in Benghazi appears to have been the hub. We link to a whole bunch of articles which tie Hillary in with support for Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And so there's a big scandal that they don't want you to look at. They're going to cop to the email server misbehavior in the hope that you won't notice what's going on behind it. That at a time when you are being told Al-Qaeda and ISIS are our mortal enemies, our declared enemies in a war on terror, that Hillary Rodham Clinton was supervising the transfer of weapons from Libya to Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria. And one of two cases has to apply. If she did it on her own, without authorization from the Obama administration, she's technically guilty of treason. Aid and comfort to an enemy in time of war. Now, if Obama ordered her to do this, and I don't think Hillary would have done it on her own, that's an even bigger secret. Because what's going to happen when 300,000 Americans realize that the entire war on terror is a fraud, that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are manufactured fake enemies, just like Emmanuel Goldstein in George Orwell's 1984, created by the government to keep us scared and dependent, to get us to surrender our money and the lives of our children for what are really wars of imperial conquest. That, too, is something that has to be hidden from the American people at all costs. So we're going to do a limited hangout, over here about the server and hope you don't notice the rest. And there's one other possibility, and this touches into that previous article about espionage. And that is, maybe it was. Maybe that's what's going on. Looking back in history, back in 1996, when Bill Clinton was running for re-election, there were some very questionable deals going on. At the time, it was called Chinagate. And this was where Chinese money was being poured into the Clinton re-election campaign. Now, under U.S. law, candidates may not accept donations from foreign nationals or non-citizens. And all these Chinagate donations were made through U.S. citizens of Chinese origin, such as John Huang and Charlie Tree. And a lot of these donations had to be returned. When it turned out they were coming from the Chinese government, Chinese intelligence agencies. John Huang later pleaded to one felony count of campaign finance violations. Tree was convicted of violating campaign finance laws in 1908. Then you had Johnny Chung, who funneled $366,000 to the Democratic National Committee going into the 1996 election. And Chung later told a special Senate committee that $35,000 of the contributions came from individuals within the Chinese intelligence community. Chung pleaded guilty to bank fraud, tax evasion, and campaign finance violations. Now, while all this Chinese money was coming in, President Bill Clinton started to authorize the transfer of sensitive U.S. technology to China, including technology that would help improve the accuracy of China's nuclear missiles. Huge upset within the U.S. government, within the Pentagon especially, and Clinton kept saying, oh, no, this is just for their communication satellites. There is no military application for any of this. So, from 1996, we have a history, a record of the Clintons treating the United States and its sensitive secrets like it's their own personal property that they can sell for donations to re-election campaigns or charitable foundations. More when we come back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the possible scandals behind the scandal of Hillary's email server. That we're looking at a limited hangout where they're going to cop to the email server and focus on it so you don't look behind to see other things that were going on. The way Monica Lewinsky and the stained blue dress were used to distract you from and keep you from noticing the far worse scandals of government-sanctioned drug running, which also involved the Clintons and their friends, many of whom went to jail, by the way. So, from 1996, we have the Chinagate scandal. The President Bill Clinton was authorizing the transfer of sensitive, high technology to China, technology with military applications, technology where there was a huge outcry. We can't let the Chinese have this. And Clinton said, no, this is just for their communication satellites. They would never, ever, ever use it for their weapons, which is, of course, what they did. And while all these transfers were going on, all this illegal Chinese money was pouring into the Clinton re-election campaign. Now, with that pattern, let's step a little closer to the present day. The Clintons have set up a corporation called the Bill and Hillary Clinton Foundation, which publicly presents itself as a charitable foundation. That status is actually in doubt because the paperwork that makes it a legal 501c3 does not seem to exist. Now, the Clinton Foundation spends just a tiny fraction of its revenues on any real charities, usually in full view of the press cameras. And the rules for a charitable nonprofit foundation is half the money you take in has to go out for these charitable purposes. Now, as far as anybody can tell from what little bookkeeping has escaped their clutches, Bill and Hillary Clinton seem to be the biggest charity receiving most of the money from the Clinton Foundation. According to an article over in the Federalist, portions of the foundation are operating as simple cash pass-throughs. They get the money for a certain purpose. They simply dump it into the general fund over at the Clinton Foundation. A watchdog group on real charities has gone on record saying the Clinton Foundation is nothing more than a slush fund. Just a big stash of cash for them to use whatever they want to do. Now, not too long ago, public activist attorney Larry Klayman, formerly of Judicial Watch, filed a RICO lawsuit against the Clinton Foundation, making a compelling case that it was a corrupt organization masquerading as a charitable foundation, but it was basically a catch bin for bribes and gifts pouring on in for the Clintons' personal use. Now, had the case actually gone to trial and it been found accurate, under the RICO laws, it would have resulted in the confiscation of all assets of the Clinton Foundation by the U.S. government. It's going to wipe out part of the deficit, I think. However, the Clinton Foundation lobbied furiously against the case, and in the end, a Clinton-appointed judge who refused to recuse himself from the case despite the obvious conflict of interest simply tossed the case out. Now, under the guise of being a charitable nonprofit, the Clinton Foundation can legally accept foreign donations. And quite a bit of cash has poured in from foreign sources. And it didn't take too long before people noticed that donations were coming from nations and individuals who benefited handsomely from policy changes made in Hillary Clinton's State Department. Nations and companies that gave to the Clinton Foundation or paid huge fees for Clinton's speeches enjoyed favorable treatment from the U.S. Department of State. Governments that had previously been forbidden from buying U.S. weapons all of a sudden were granted permission to buy U.S. weapons after making donations to the Clinton Foundation. So, rampant greed, corruption, a prior record of selling U.S. secrets for a fast campaign buck, a charitable foundation that is anything but charitable, acting as a collection point. Toss in a private email server with weak security, no encryption, and you have all the parts needed for the greatest spy scandal in U.S. history, run out of the U.S. Department of State by the Secretary of State herself. Now just imagine, a foreign interest makes a generous donation to the Clinton Foundation. Then they get an IP address and a directory through anonymous email. They hack into the email server and they get what they want. It's a delivery system. And it's a better delivery system than taping packages underneath bridges, which has got Robert Hansen caught. Hillary gets to claim she's innocent. I didn't know my server was hacked or had been hacked. And the money pours into the foundation. Talk about a scandal. A Secretary of State acting as a foreign spy. Not for any one particular nation, just for own personal enrichment. That's a scandal that could bring down the entire government. And I don't want you thinking about that. So we're going to just fret over this little email server in the computer, and we'll keep all the focus and attention on that. And, you know, don't you ever dare think there's anything worse going on behind. Oh, that server, that's as bad as it gets. Trust us. The email server is the stained blue dress, a small scandal admitted to conceal the greater scandals hidden behind. So now we come to the question, will Hillary fall on her sword to protect Obama and the U.S. government? Will she accept her fall from power as gracefully as Nixon accepted his? I doubt it. For those that want to keep the fact that the war of terror is a hoax hidden, Hillary's become a live liability. The same is true for those who want to hide from the American people that there was a U.S. Secretary of State who sold out her country from within the Department of State. And in the United States, live liabilities do not survive very long. Just ask Barry Seal or Vince Foster or any of the other strange deaths. Ron Brown. So we'll see what happens, but there's more to the email server scandal than just the email. I guarantee it. We're looking at a limited hangout. There's a bigger secret behind that. Now, Joe Biden has hired himself a new spokeswoman from within the film industry, Kate Bedingfield. And it's another indicator that Biden is very serious about stepping in to the campaign. And Biden's meeting with Elizabeth Warren. Can you imagine a Biden-Warren Democratic ticket? That's going to be powerful. Because, Hillary was just counting that women were going to vote for her just because she's a woman. Most modern feminists are actually appalled by that presumption on her part, that they're just going to go along because it's a woman. And I get a lot of emails from people saying, oh, you hate Hillary because you don't want a woman president. No, I don't want that woman as president. I don't have a problem with a woman being president. It's based on performance. I don't want Hillary there because of the corruption. I don't want Carly Fiorina there because of how she almost wrecked Hewlett-Packard. I don't want Sarah Palin there because she's an idiot. Linda Lingle, I would support for the presidency. Linda and I didn't see eye to eye when she was governor of Hawaii, but she knows the job. And that's what we need in Washington, D.C., competence, because that is sorely lacking right now. Okay, we got an anonymous caller on the line here. Hello, I don't know what your name is or where you're calling from, but what's on your mind? We seem to be getting a lot of these blank phone calls for some strange reason, so we will drop that. We're coming up here on the top of the hour news break. When we come on back, we're going to be talking with Mike Strizky of Hydrogen House about their latest project, and then catching up on some of the other latest developments from the world of science, technology, and health. And don't forget, tomorrow in our third hour, Dr. David Duke will be our on-air guest talking about the fallout from his recent appearance on the Alex Jones Show. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And joining us right now is Mike Strizky of the Hydrogen House Project. Mike, aloha. Welcome back to the show. And what are the latest developments? Hello, Mike. Are you there?
Hello?
There you are. Okay. Little technical gremlin there. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. We had a little bit of a glitch there. Anyway, so welcome to our show, Mike Strizky. What are the latest developments going on with the Hydrogen House Project?
The latest developments are I've been spending the last 9 years living in a hydrogen home and refining the system for commercialization. We've just completed the first solar hydrogen commercially viable and affordable fuel cell home in the world, just 5 miles from my home. And we're planning to, we're doing a dedication event on September 11th. I call it Energy Independence Day, where we're going to announce this to the world and put it up for show. And so basically, people will be able to start to afford this technology, just taking advantage of the regular credits that are out there, ITC federal credits, and, and being able to buy it outright. So, this marks a milestone where we're going from, horse and buggy, to the machine age. So now we're leaving the, automobile behind and we're moving to the, next generation of all electrically powered vehicles. So, it's not only vehicles, but it's going to be everything. We have cell phone chargers. Fuel cells are going to be put into everything right now. And all of the major players are now jockeying for position in this market. This year there'll be 5,000 fuel cell vehicles out there. We're going to have companies like Hyster just bought Nuvera Fuel Cell to start converting their fleet over. You have Plug Power announcing that they're going to be making a profit for the first time this year. And you have a lot of the bigger companies acquiring the smaller ones now and trending into markets where these things are going to be commonplace. Okay. A lot of the things we're doing right now, we're basically breaking the biggest problems with the energy storage by coming up with a fuel cell system and an electrolyzer system that's affordable. So these are the biggest breakthroughs that we've seen so far. I'm working with a company called Millennium Rain in Ohio that has an affordable electrolyzer, which is the holy grail to what I've been doing for the last few years. So now you get to be your own power plant, your own oil refinery without the oil. And you truly are resilient and energy independent. And, that's kind of the American thing to do in the American way. And I'm offering it to people right now today, and we're coming up with financing packages. And we're all actually thinking of moving to Hawaii as one of the first places to introduce the systems.
Well, I would certainly welcome you here, and I'd be very interested in seeing what's going on. Now, when you talk about an affordable prototype hydrogen house, are we talking about where the entire house and electric system are built by you, or is this a technology that will be licensed to other home builders to include in their offerings to sort of get it out there a little bit faster?
Yeah, I mean, our strategy is to basically go out there and acquire solar companies with already customer lists and are familiar with servicing solar systems and buy them up and then have them as our sales arm. So we would go to Hawaii, buy up a solar company, teach them how to use, sell, and service our units, and that's how we're going to get them out there.
Well, we've got two very big ones out here on the island I'm aware of. Is Haleakala, House of the Sun, and another one called Kumu Kit that I actually produced some commercials for. I'm sure they're going to be very, very interested. And I know right now here in Hawaii, our state government is starting to show indications of a concern about becoming a little less dependent on the U.S. mainland. They put through new legislation to stimulate domestic food production on this island. They want more of the food Hawaiians eat actually developed right here in Hawaii. And I think this idea of generating our own power and not being dependent on a petroleum-based power station and petroleum imports, I think is going to be very attractive to them as well. We went through kind of a weird transition where solar came to Hawaii. There were huge tax credits for it. Everybody was getting into it. We've got a supermarket just down the street that is putting solar all over their entire parking lot. And then all of a sudden there was an intense lobbying effort by our local power utility because all this solar was cutting into their profits. And for a while, permits for solar seemed to dry up. And then all of a sudden it flipped back again. And there's a huge boom going on for solar here. And I think a lot of it has to do with this idea of what if Hawaii all of a sudden had to be self-sufficient. And that seems to be a growing awareness within our state government, which, of course, I applaud.
Yeah, I think people have been remembering that there are a lot of natural disasters are accelerating. If you look around the country, I think there's a hurricane heading for Hawaii right now, but we had gone through some terrible winter storms here in the Northeast with Sandy and Irene. But our system here has basically survived those storms. My Jewel Box system, which is on the website, hydrogenhouseproject.org, you can see that these systems are survivable. And what a lot of people found out is, people thought they were safe when they had backup generators. The ones that run on natural gas, the entire New Jersey shore, had all of the gas lines ripped up. So, and what's the first thing they do in an emergency? They shut off the gas and the electric. So you're really left out in the cold. So getting a generator is no consolation. A lot of my neighbors were all laughing at me, before Irene and Sandy and saying, look, we got a generator, I've got 6 days worth of runtime. Well, the event here lasted 45 days, and they're all coming to my house begging for a hot shower, charge their cell phone, and something warm to eat. So, you're not independent or you're not safe unless you can generate your own power from the big nuclear ball in the sky. And that's what this system allows you to do, is to be your own oil refinery. Cooking gas, heating gas, and fuel from the vehicles, all done from renewable. I mean, there's no wheels to well. Think about a system that produces pure oxygen and pure water. That's my byproducts. Well, not carbon, not dirty water, nothing else. Think of how much cleaner the world's going to get with this technology.
Well, there's another aspect here, certainly within Hawaii, that is not connected with natural disasters or collapsing economies, and that is that there are still significant portions of our state to which the regular public utilities don't even reach yet. And especially over on Kauai and the rest, and there's land that's there available for residential development, and a lot of people would like to go out there, but there's no city power hookup, there's no city water hookup. So the idea of a self-sustaining hydrogen house could be a real blessing for the real estate market out here in Hawaii as well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, these jewel boxes could be put on the top of a mountain, and they just keep storing power. If you had a cabin in the woods and it just keeps making power, your batteries, when they're full, you're done. But you can just keep adding cheap propane tanks and store as much energy as you like. And you know, batteries go bad over time. Hydrogen's forever. It's as good today as it'll be 100 million years from today.
Yeah, that's an important aspect here in Hawaii, because when any kind of electronics goes bad, there really isn't any way that you can just go down to the store and get it. We've lost most of our Radio Shacks. Circuit City's gone. We're at the point right now where I live in Oahu, which is the most developed of the Hawaiian Islands, and these days, if something breaks on any of our systems, I have to order it through the mail. And so the idea that if a battery fails, you could be without it for 2 to 3 weeks while a replacement comes in, that becomes a significant factor. Mike, we have to take a 4-minute break for commercials, and then we'll be back. We'll be talking with Mike Strisky about Hydrogen House. Personally, I find the idea very exciting. And, Mike, if you're coming out here to Hawaii, I want to meet you and see the house, and we're going to have fun with all this stuff. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Mike Strisky of the Hydrogen House Project. And, Mike, in our last segment, you mentioned about just buying more propane tanks to store the surplus hydrogen that you're creating. And it reminded me that there's a misconception, and I was guilty of it too, which is why I was a little slow to coming on board with what you're doing. I'm a child of the 60s. I remember the space program. I remember the Apollo moon launches and how hard it was to keep cryogenic hydrogen confined in a tank, that it would literally seep through the sides of the tank and be lost, had to be constantly topped off, and I considered that to be a major impediment. But just to clarify for our audience, gaseous room temperature hydrogen is much easier to contain with very, ordinary technology. It doesn't require anything sophisticated. And that is something I think we need to remind people, because if they're my age and remembering the problems of dealing with cryogenic fuels, they're going to say, oh, that's going to be more headaches than it's worth. That's a completely different approach to the problem than what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, first thing, whenever you talk about hydrogen, because it's new, people are always worried about safety. And the only point that I can make is that, I can take a hydrogen fuel cell phone charger on an airplane with me in the cabin and use it, during the flight, get it through your onboard screening, but you can't take bottled water. So that's how safe these are, is that they're allowed in aircraft. I can carry 14 liters of hydrogen, in a 400-pound tube, on an aircraft. The other thing is in this day of lawyers, we have all the major automakers going to fuel cell vehicles, which means that it has to be safer than the fuels we already use. These things go down the road at 80 miles an hour. They drive through water. They drive through wet, snow, ice, every kind of hazardous condition on this planet. And you got to remember, they survived the hazardous world known to man, which is outer space. So as far as the safety of fuel cells, you can put a car in your garage at home that has 10,000 pounds, of hydrogen stored in the tank, and it's equivalent of 3 gallons of gasoline, not 40. So it's just an education process right now. It's like where the cell phones were back in, in the late 80s. This technology is going to accelerate very rapidly, and we're going to find it in almost everything we know, and your infrastructure is going to be your home. That's what's so critical about debuting this house, is because where are you going to get the hydrogen? And the answer is going to be at home. If people, in Hawaii want to check out, a similar installation, they can go to the Blue Planet Foundation, and they have electrolyzers and fuel cells similar to my house operating at the foundation. So check out the internet website. I think it's blueplanetfoundation.org, and you can take a look at it, if you want to see it locally. Other than that, if you want to come to my Hydrogen House invitation, the invitations are available online. You have to RSVP. We're limiting it to 200 people because the demand's been so high. But anyway, if anybody would like to sponsor the event or they would like to, view it online, there's going to be lots of information as we go. The house, there's a whole scenario of how it was constructed, and we're soon going to see this all over the world.
Well, I certainly
and it's not
hope
just
so.
me saying this.
No, I'm convinced. I came in when I first contacted you for our first interview before. I was very skeptical, but I'm absolutely convinced now. I did get a couple of emails, and again, you're dealing with some popular misconceptions. When you talk about hydrogen, people think of the Hindenburg, but it's now known that what destroyed the Hindenburg was not the hydrogen, but the accidental thermite in the hull. And even the Mythbusters did a show on this. That it was the iron oxide primer and the shiny aluminum paint over it inadvertently created a thermite blanket, and that's what took down the Hindenburg. The other one, of course, is when you say fuel cell, everybody thinks, aha, Apollo 13. But if you remember, what destroyed the Apollo 13 wasn't the fuel cell, but one of the oxygen tanks which had a faulty heater, which you need in the ice cold of space, but it's not part of your technology here on Earth because everything's already at the correct operating temperature. And so again, these are not going to be issues affecting the safety of your products.
Yeah, I mean, one of the key things that we did with this first hydrogen house is that we've actually certified the plug power fuel cell for residential use. Up until now, that has never been done. So that's a huge milestone to the point now that we can actually sell fuel cells for residential use and construct homes under international building codes. This particular house was done with the local building inspector. We didn't get the agency involved, the Department of Community Affairs, to do this house because the inspector felt comfortable in doing it. And they knew that I knew what I was doing after building my own and living in it for the last 9 years. So I'm really grateful to have a voice like Toyota out there where they know what Fukushima's like. They know what years of recycling batteries do to the planet and to the environment. And, they're picking the winner. I'm sure you're aware of, or maybe some of your listeners, that, Extreme Energy had a lithium-ion battery storage facility for wind energy that caught fire. And when that did catch fire, you had a company go out of business with $1 billion on the books. That's the problem with batteries. When the electronics fail with these high-energy batteries, things burn up. Just remember the Sony laptops. So this hydrogen is way safer than lithium-ion batteries. And I use the stuff that I use. If I'm using batteries, I'm using lead acid because all I'm doing is using the batteries for peaking, and I'm storing excess kilowatt hours in hydrogen. I can use 100% of my hydrogen. You use 20% or 50% out of a battery, it's dead.
Well, you run the battery all the way down, you shorten its lifespan, too. That's another aspect where you're always having to keep most of the charge on the battery has to be kept there permanently and not used.
That's correct. You can't use it or you kill the battery. Hydrogen, you can go down to zero.
All right, well, we have about 1 minute left. If there's anything else. By the way, we have linked to the Hydrogen House Project website from WhatReallyHappened.com if people want to go and look. This is very exciting. It's new, it's cool, and I do hope you come to Hawaii, and if you do, I want to get involved. And is there anything else you want to share with our listeners before we sign off?
I'm just saying, just take a look at the technology. This is real. Basically, I'm a realist. I take what I can use now and integrate it, and I'm looking for those early adopters out there that want to separate themselves, and they want that sense of security. If you're a prepper, this is the ultimate energy system. The maintenance on these systems is very, very minimal. In the 6 years that I've been here, all I've changed was filters. So this stuff, it just simple, stupid works.
That's always the best way to go. Also great for remote research stations, forestry buildings out there where there's no wiring. The applications are pretty much endless out there, and I think it's really nice to see something this new and exciting come along. Mike, thank you very much. We'll have you back in the very, very near future. Good luck with Hydrogen House. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And the more I think about Hydrogen House, it just really strikes me as having a high hypness factor. Great for self-sufficiency, dealing with crises, but there are other potentials out there, like remote research stations for people who are out in the middle of the desert or way up in the mountains away from city infrastructure for long-term research studies. This is perfect, powering their life needs and their electronic equipment at the same time. And its byproducts are water and oxygen. Kind of hard to argue with that, really. All right, so moving on here. Over in Great Britain, they're coming up on their election, and Jeremy Corbyn is basically the equivalent of our Donald Trump. He's a maverick, an outsider. All of the establishment people hate him, and the more they bash on him, the better his poll numbers get. And Jeremy Corbyn has just done something which will definitely make him an enemy of the money junkies, because he is floating a plan for the Bank of England to provide interest-free loans under certain circumstances, the way the Bank of Canada originally was supposed to do for infrastructure development, until the Canadian government sold out the Canadian people back in the 1970s. And basically, Jeremy Corbyn is out there saying that he'll just fire the head of the Bank of England if they refuse to go along. Bank of England's been a royal pain in the derriere, certainly was for the founding fathers of the United States of America. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the program, there's been a massive fire at a Tokyo steel plant. We're seeing all of a sudden these critical pieces of economic infrastructure, seaports, oil pipelines, steel plants, all of a sudden having all these problems happen. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm suspicious and cynical and proud of it. But there are just too many of these things happening right now. Just coincidental? I don't think so. I don't have any proof they're deliberate, but we do know that when nations engage in economic war, sabotage of key economic assets inevitably becomes part of that economic war. Crop poisoning, sabotage of pipelines, delivery systems does happen all the time. All the time. Now, over in Germany, their concern, if you will, the angst over uncontrolled immigration is continuing to climb. There are clashes between the German people and the riot police in Heidenau, which is south of Dresden, over the building of a new refugee shelter. And Germany is getting just as sick of the flood of newcomers coming into their country as Americans are with Mexicans, Nicaraguans, Costa Ricans, and so forth, who are coming here illegally. I think this uncontrolled immigration that we've been seeing all over the U.S. and Europe is part of a plan to dilute our sense of a national identity. They want that to go. They want us to stop thinking about being an American or being this or that and just sort of be this kind of floating in limbo. I don't know what I am. Well, you're part of the New World Order here. And along that line, out in Southern California, the Apple Valley High School in the Inland Empire has decided to be politically incorrect. They are not banning Confederate flag clothing. They said this is nonsense. And the school spokesman basically laid it out. If they start banning the Confederate flag clothing, then they'd have to ban a long list of other clothing with other icons and symbols on there that you can always find somebody to be offended by. Remember that big stink over the school that ordered students not to wear the American flag to school on Cinco de Mayo? And I hate to break this to you, Cinco de Mayo is actually a Mexican holiday. It's not a legal official American holiday. We sort of, out of respect and politeness, acknowledge it, and that's fine. but not to the point where we subsume our own national identity to please the Cincoans. Now, here's a really bizarre story. This came out of Government Slaves. Apparently, there was a counter-protest in support of Planned Parenthood against those gosh darn pro-lifers. And the demonstrators were pouring milk over women to show how these pro-lifers are just turning women into brood mares and, you know, they're just property to crank out children. Well, first of all, that's not accurate. You know, right to choose means if you don't want to be a mother, that's just fine. Just don't engage in sex, or if you're going to engage in sex, take the appropriate precautions. What's wrong with that? Why is that a problem for people? But the other place where this is going to backflash on them is apparently the group that put on this protest is part of a church that worships Satan. And I don't think that's actually putting out the image Planned Parenthood wants to see right now. Great deal of silliness. Down in Reno, Nevada, the Reno County Health Department says the majority of the whooping cough cases they are dealing with were found in individuals who had been vaccinated for the whooping cough. And we keep seeing this over and over and over again, where there'll be a declared epidemic of whooping cough or mumps or measles, and the media will say, see, you've got to get the vaccine. And then it comes out, the vast majority of the people with the illness had the vaccine. Remember that outbreak they had over at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign? I think that's where it was. And everybody was coming down sick with mumps, and they said, see, they should have had the vaccine. And it turned out these kids had the vaccination twice because of all the rules saying you got to be vaccinated for this and that. And what was the state health department's response? Well, get a third vaccination. That'll make it all better. It's all about pushing the product out there. Now, you probably are not aware of this because the corporate media won't mention it, but the French are opposed to vaccines in general, let alone mandatory, because of the demonstrated harm. Remember, the National Vaccine Court in the United States has confirmed, acknowledged, over 100 deaths linked to the measles vaccine. The CDC reports there's only been one death from measles itself in the last 10 years, and that was in a lady who had just gotten the measles shot. At the very least, most generous, delicate, polite form, we have to see these vaccines are not working. To be more honest, looking at the numbers, these vaccines are causing the illness. It's quite a scam. We're going to get a few people to take the shot, they get sick, and then we put them up on the media saying, see, this is why you should get your shot. And the kid says, I got the shot. And they say, shut up, kid. I'm here to make money. Now, the other day, we were talking about this very bizarre story where Israel is now putting out this idea that the children of Holocaust victims experience the trauma of the Holocaust through their DNA. It's passed on to them in their DNA, and therefore today's Jewish children of the Holocaust are deserving of compensation. Because even though they weren't actually there, they are feeling the pain. There's a problem with that, and I'll mention it when we get back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And this story came out last week. As you know, Israel's running out of real Nazi war criminals and real Holocaust survivors to wag at us to try and get more money from us. And so in what is clearly a pathetic attempt to create a permanent sense of obligation to Israel, they've come out with this idea that they have scientifically proven that the children of the Holocaust survivors are personally experiencing the trauma of the Holocaust because it was given to them in their genes, their DNA. oh, you know, that we have to go on giving all our money to these poor people who suffered so much during whatever it is that was supposed to happen in Nazi Germany. And by the way, get the money from Germany, stop asking it from Americans. We sacrificed a lot of blood and treasure to stop the Nazis from doing whatever it is you keep telling us they were trying to do. Talk about ingratitude. But there's a problem. The foundation of the liberal establishment is that the human mind is born blank and is shaped by the environment. That's the justification for the liberal tinkering with every aspect of our lives. To re-engineer the human mind by re-engineering the environment. It is a founding principle of the liberal establishment that we don't inherit any part of our state of mind, which is nonsense. People like to talk about the 90% of the DNA that doesn't seem to do anything. I'll tell you what it does. It carries the programming so that babies know to breathe. But remember, modern liberalism goes back to that idea that the human mind is tabula rasa, and we can re-engineer the human mind from scratch because it's completely blank at birth. That was all based on Margaret Mead's book, Coming of Age in Samoa, which seemed to suggest that the stresses and angst of adolescence are a product of our society and not raging hormonal influences. Of course, the book was a complete hoax. But you see where I'm getting at. They can't sign on to this idea that the trauma of the Holocaust is passed by DNA without undermining one of the core principles of political liberalism. They got themselves in a little bit of a corner, as it were. Now then, you remember that big disaster in the Colorado River? The EPA just unleashed this huge toxic sludge mess. It turns out that only shortly before they had that accident in Colorado, they did the same thing in Georgia, contaminating the Animas River system. They're not really very good at taking care of the environment, are they? But then they never were intended to. The EPA was created by Richard Nixon as an excuse to grab away huge tracts of publicly owned land, lock it away from the American people who are the legal owners, to pledge as collateral on the national debt following the ending of gold convertibility. That's what the EPA's real purpose is. Now, here's a story coming out of RINF.com. Not too long ago, you probably saw it on the corporate media, where scientists came out and said that a lack of exercise causes obesity, not whether you're eating a lot of sugar. We have proven sugar's got nothing to do with it. It's your lack of exercise. Turns out these scientists were funded by the Coca-Cola Company. Imagine my shock. It's the golden rule of science. Whoever's got the gold decides the science. Coca-Cola buys scientists to say sugar's not a problem. Al Gore buys scientists to say humans are warming the planet. Scientific method is a valuable, legitimate tool for you to determine for yourself what's going on in the world. But you should never trust individual scientists just because they're scientists. Because individual scientists are just as corruptible as individual politicians or individual clergy. And that is a reality. They're just as swayed by money and glory and promises of gold things to hang on the wall and promises of media attention. There's another article talking about Windows 10 and how much it's spying on everything that you do. There's an article here, how to opt out, but it turns out the opting out doesn't shut it off. And people who've installed Windows 10 who are on metered internet service, they're hitting their service caps. They're going over their caps and they're being charged huge amounts of money for exceeding their bandwidth plan. And here's where it gets really interesting. Microsoft's new privacy policy with Windows 10 is, if Microsoft's computers that are getting all this stuff from your machine detect content they think might be illegal, they will report you. On that basis alone, I will not install Windows 10. Not because I'm doing anything that I've got to hide or be ashamed of. There's a principle involved here. Mostly, I won't put up with such uppity behavior from appliances. They're supposed to work for me, not the other way around. I'm still annoyed that I couldn't keep my XP system. I'm still annoyed that I still can't install my 3D Studio Max legitimate licensed copy on Windows 7. Windows 7 is so secure, even I can't use it. Not too surprisingly, the Vice Speaker of the State Duma in Russia has requested the Russian government ban Windows 10 in all state government institutions. I'm surprised they're allowing anything made in America to be used there. It's time to go open source Linux. Open source everything. By the way, there's a new open source Office suite that's out there. It's a parallel to OpenOffice, which kind of got taken over, and now it's spawned off a new version. All completely open source. Word processing, presentation, spreadsheet, all these essentials, and you know what's in there. You know they're not spying on you. You don't get that guarantee with Windows 10. Windows 10 privacy policy is you have no right to know what we're doing. We're spying on everything you do, and if we even suspect you're doing something tacky, we're going to rat you out to the police and the FBI. It's amazing. By the way, according to a Story Investment Watch blog, the U.S. Embassy in Berlin is hiring Internet trolls for public relations and to combat anti-American tendencies. So that jerk who is ignoring the facts, calling you bad names, making no sense at all, standing there with his or her hair on fire, insisting they cannot smell smoke, they're being paid to look that stupid. By your tax dollars. And by the way, I don't think any government has a right to spend the public's tax money to deceive the public. It's certainly not in the Constitution. Just something to think about. Spotify caused a bit of a firestorm when they changed their privacy policy and wanted all kinds of additional information. Your GPS coordinates, wanted to look through your contacts, huge backlash. Now, I never signed up for Spotify, but apparently Spotify has now backed off and said, yeah, we guess that's a little over the top, and we're going to back down. They're not really spying on you for the government, but that information is of use to marketing companies, and that's where they're making their money. When there's a free website you can use, like a Spotify or a Facebook or whatever, they're not doing it out of the generosity of their hearts. They're getting money somewhere. Advertising, yeah, but the information they collect from you goes to marketing companies. All the time when I'm researching stories for What Really Happened, I'll research something really bizarre, and the very next minute, I get ads selling whatever it was I was researching, even though I have no personal interest in owning it here. By the way, Amazon has joined in with the campaign to ban flash advertising. About time. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here, get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, aloha, America.